Hello everyone. So in this video, I thought I'll probably share not really a use case. I mean, in a way, it is a use case, but it could be a best practice, or basically, I just want to talk about it. Now, this is of course based on my experience, where people try to force Jira, or I should say, management or some kind of a company policy tries to force Jira on people who are not really supposed to use it, or I should say, for them using Jira doesn't really make sense. Now let me give you one example. Now let us say there is a company and they have been using a tool within this organization. It could be a small company, a big, or maybe a big company. And uh, to give you a very specific example, let us say a company is using SharePoint. Now, good thing, or not really a good thing, but usually, I mean, this may not be applicable all the time, but usually SharePoint is available to everyone in that organization. And because that is how companies work with Microsoft-based tools. So the moment you get a laptop and you join a new organization, you have access to Microsoft Excel, you have access to um, online teams, or basically, all the productivity utility applications are already installed for you to do your work, and SharePoint is part of it. Now, if you're talking about a big company where everyone has access to SharePoint, then it is very easy and at the same time convenient for them to do something on SharePoint. It could be raising a request, or it could be simply filling up a form, or simply accessing some information somewhere. Now the same can be true for Jira depending upon your license structure, but it is often not. So usually to access Jira, you need to make sure that particular user is provisioned. So if you're talking about a big company, you can of course raise a request, and they will basically make sure that you are added to the right group in Active Directory. And whenever the Active Directory is synced in Jira, your account will be, or their account will be provisioned. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that if, let us say, you know that 80% of your company employees will never have to raise a request to access something like SharePoint. It could be anything. It could be, let us say, some document which is stored somewhere, or maybe some Excel sheet, basically some information, or maybe something that they need to report on without requesting for access. Then it is very convenient. Now, of course, you can move them to Jira, because personally I have done a lot of SharePoint to Jira migrations, but or I should say, not only SharePoint to Jira always, but SharePoint to Confluence as well, because SharePoint can be used. SharePoint is actually very powerful. I'm not really sure why people keep on blaming SharePoint. I mean, SharePoint is just like any other tool. It is actually very productive. It can become very productive if you configure it the right way. It is nothing different from how you configure things in Jira. Of course, it is not really used in the right way, because that is how things are. Whenever you're using a tool, you have to make sure that you're using it properly. But what I'm trying to say is that SharePoint is not a bad tool. Similarly, when people compare Jira with Excel or Bugzilla or Redmine, they don't really they're not really comparing these tools. They're basically trying to blame the processes or bad practices that they have in the organization. So tool has, to be honest, in most cases nothing to do. Of course, you can mess up the tool, and at the same time you can make it very highly productive tool in that organization. But when it comes to rolling out a tool, it could be any tool, by the way, but I'm of course going to give you an example of Jira. You can of course use the capabilities of the tool to make a process well defined, because if you are filling up a form somewhere in SharePoint, or maybe somewhere on your internal website, or maybe some intranet, then of course it is accessible to everyone, but at the same time it might not get the power or the workflow capability of Jira, because when you have things in Jira, then you can have a process around it, and then you can of course do a lot of wonderful things. But before you roll out or before you move one process in your organization to Jira, or before you ask 80% of your team, or maybe n number of people of your organization team to do something in Jira instead of any other tool, then make sure that they are not really too restrictive when it comes to basically just logging into the tool, because that is actually like a friction. If imagine that you have a new process in Jira, but you're asking everyone to first raise a request before they can do things in Jira, then of course it can be a problem. It can be a bit of a friction. But at the same time, look at the benefits. Do they really need to use a tool like Jira? Because if all they are doing is either accessing the information, or maybe they're just filling up a simple form, and there is no real need to have a workflow or customization or process behind it, then let them use the old tool, existing tool. Because people usually try to force, and this is something that happens a lot, because when you are let's say getting an advice from an external consultant, most of these consultants, which is I shouldn't be saying this, because I see it happening all the time. If you hire a consultant from let us say an Atlassian partner company, in most cases, not always, of course, I'm not really trying to say that it happens all the time, but in most cases, their interest, or consciously or unconsciously, they are always biased towards a tool like Jira. I'm also biased towards a tool like Jira, because that is what I do. But at the same time, my main job as a consultant is to be honest, be transparent, and tell my clients that you don't really need to use a tool like Jira. You're probably fine with whatever you're doing with your existing tools. For example, I see a lot of people who are using, let us say, Teams. Now, in Teams, there are a lot of wonderful things that you can do. You can, of course, collaborate when it comes to documents. Like you can have a Word document, or maybe an Excel sheet, where people can, come together and they can, collaborate on the content or whatever they are doing. Then, of course, when you talk about a document is a document, right? I see people who basically create a document with an actual process. Let us say you have to do something, and for doing something, you need to do 10 different things. So you can definitely do it like some kind of a lightweight task tracking within one document, right? So you can have one document where people can come and they can update, okay, I've done this, I've done that, and they will keep on populating the document. And I'm absolutely fine with this, because it works. But at the same time, if you look at this process, they are basically doing issue tracking, and this is a perfect candidate where Jira can help them, because in Jira you will have probably one epic for the big piece of work. Then you will have basically various stories or maybe subtasks where you can assign it to different team members. But when it comes to actual content collaboration, let us say the document itself, then you can't really replace it with Jira. Sometimes people also try to use Confluence, and they seek those rich editing features or tracking features of MS Word, or maybe if you take an example of Excel sheet, right? So Excel sheet, MS Office, SharePoint, they are really good in what they do, but at the same time, we as a consultant, it is our job and responsibility to not give them this statement that yes, don't use Jira, don't use Excel, don't use SharePoint, or use Jira, or don't use Jira. We have to basically look at what they're doing and spend time with them, because sometimes you need to dig a bit more deep to understand what they're doing with these existing tools in the organization. And just reaching or just trying to conclude that yes, Jira can solve all of your problems is probably not the right thing. And I see it happening quite a lot, where and to be honest, because I'm saying this because I encounter these things every day. I work with organizations, but I also work with other consultants. I also work with so-called agile coaches, where all they're supposed to do is sell their services, or services, I should say, training or certifications. But people often forget, and in fact, the companies also forget, that the end goal is to deliver. If you are trying to use a tool like Jira or any tool, if you're not delivering, then there is no point. I mean, there is no point of using a wonderful project in Jira with the different workflows and customizations if your teams are frustrated, or they're probably missing those 80% of the features that were there in their older tools. But in Jira, they have a workflow. Workflow is fine, customizations are fine, those dashboards are fine, but do you really need those features if your needs are different? So just be careful. And in this video, I just wanted to share my ideas and thoughts. And these days, I'm making a lot of these talking videos. I'm not really showing you something on the tool itself, because I mean, if you look at the content that I make, my videos, I should say 95% of the content is basically me showing you something in the tool. But I'm a consultant. I mean, people often forget when they reach out to me, when they ask questions, they think that I'm just a YouTuber. I am a YouTuber, I guess, because I make videos, but I'm a consultant. I help organizations get the most out of these Atlassian tools and also other tools. I will probably, share a few things related to other tools or other things that I do, and I'm basically trying to gradually include, because my channel is all about Jira and Atlassian tools, but I am now going to share few other things slowly and gradually. I'm not really going to just have mixed content on my channel. Main focus is definitely, as of right now, as of 2023, April 2023, it is definitely Atlassian tools, Jira, Confluence, Scriptana. But you can expect videos on or content on other topics. I'll keep you posted. Anyways, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and you learned something new. Thank you very much. Bye bye.